Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 11:30 out here on the East Coast. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, slowing down for nobody on the recruiting trail as they land another commitment in the 2024 class in four-star defensive lineman Jericho Johnson. And if you're an Oregon fan, you're looking at this 2024 class. One, it's something special, but more importantly, this looks like a Dan Lanning recruiting class along the line of scrimmage, especially on that defensive line. I mean, bringing in a guy like Aiden Breland, Elijah Russian, Zadavian Sims, Jericho Johnson, a laundry list of difference makers along that defensive line. And this is kind of what we expected from Dan Lanning when he took the job in Eugene. I mean, coming over from Georgia and the defensive lines that they produced, you kind of had a feeling this would happen in Eugene, and it couldn't have happened at a better time heading into the Big Ten. This Oregon class continues to impress me. Dan Lanning, I mean, many of the Oregon fans that have been rocking with the fellas for a while know how fired up I am about Dan Lanning, what he can do with this program going into the Big Ten, and quite frankly, on the national landscape, as well as a premier college football playoff team. Going to get into Jericho Johnson, talk a little bit about this Oregon class in 2024 before we do. Again, just want to say, appreciate you guys. And this is a program that we've talked a ton about. Two separate videos on National Signing Day yesterday as Oregon flipped two massive commitments at the wide receiver position. The Oregon fans, you guys have continued to show a ton of love. Cannot thank you guys enough. Many of you guys know I love talking recruiting. You guys giving me the ability, the platform to do so. It means a lot. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Jericho Johnson. And I think the main reason why you see this guy as a premier defensive line prospect in this 2024 class is the combination of athleticism and size that Jericho Johnson brings. I mean, 6'4", 300 pounds, and you take a look at Jericho Johnson's film. We'll turn that on in just a second. He carries that 300 pounds extraordinarily well. And that's kind of rare for a lot of guys coming from the high school ranks. When you see those 300-plus pound guys, they're not always carrying that weight extremely well. They're big bodies. They're powerful bodies. They're not necessarily the best athletes. I think what separates Jericho Johnson is he carries that weight extremely well. And you're going to see a couple things on the film. One, powerful, powerful hands. I mean, he is throwing cinder blocks at offensive linemen, has a very strong lower body too. He's a powerful guy, an explosive guy. But his get off the line of scrimmage with the combination of the power that he has in his hands, that's kind of what makes him special. And you take a look at the physical traits. The physical traits are certainly there with a guy like Jericho Johnson. What the thing that kind of impressed me the most is looking at some of his numbers. I mean, from that inside of the defensive line, just an absolute game record. Last 2 years of high school football, 33 tackles for loss, 18 sacks. He's combining that. And you guys know that this means a lot to me, right? Not only do you have the physical traits to be a good football player, but you're showing that you are a good football player right now as well at the high school level. Jericho Johnson certainly brings that to the table. Now, you turn on the film, you guys will kind of see a little bit of what I'm talking about. Watch Jericho Johnson's film a couple times through, and you love how he lines up all over that defensive line and kind of wins a variety of different ways. And you see that first one. That's kind of the explosiveness that I'm talking about. I mean, just firing out of his stance, getting right into the center, and I mean, just dominate. And you see the heavy hands that he has, and you're also going to see some athleticism here, kind of lining up more as that three tech here. The lateral movement put on display here. We're going to get outside. We're going to show a little closing speed and able to stretch out some plays and make some difference-making plays as an athlete as well. You're going to see it once again here. What I love is when he has to move in space, Jericho Johnson can do that. And Oregon has some guys on that inside of the defensive line who were powerful, guys like Popo Amave. They weren't necessarily the most fluid athletes in space. And when you get a special interior guy like a Jericho Johnson who has the combination of, yes, I'm extremely powerful and a massive body, but I'm also a phenomenal athlete, that's kind of what excites you the most about prospects on the defensive line. That get off for someone who's 300 pounds is kind of incredible. I mean, again, it kind of beats most of these offensive linemen out of their stands, gets inside the backfield, and makes a game-changing play there. I'm a massive fan of Jericho Johnson, but I'll tell you what I'm a little bit more of a massive fan of is what they're doing on the defensive line. Not only Jericho Johnson, but you pair him up with a guy like Aiden Breland. I mean, those are two of the best interior defensive line prospects that we see in this 2024 class, they're both coming to Eugene. You take a look at the edge rushers, a guy like Elijah Rushing, who has a 84-inch wingspan. The ceiling for Elijah Rushing coming off that edge, absolutely massive. And you scroll down, there are some guys that really excite you on this defensive line. Zadavian Sims, a guy that I think gets up to 300 pounds during his time in Eugene. You look at what they're doing along the trenches on that defensive line, it's absolutely dominant. But what's even more impressive about this class is, yes, this defensive line class, really impressive, but this defensive class as a whole, that's what has to get you fired up, because you have an elite defensive line. And when you have rangy, playmaking linebackers behind a dominant defensive line, that's when you get a special defense. And you, again, look at the blueprint of the Georgia Bulldogs. They had a very good defensive line. Those defensive linemen kept those linebackers clean. And when you have good linebackers who are kept clean, they can go make plays. You take a look at who they have coming in from that linebacker room. Really, really excited. Obviously, Matuidi coming from Los Alamitos. Dylan Williams, a guy that Dan Lanning had to fight on to keep him from flipping his commitment to Nebraska. The linebacker class, absolutely awesome. And then you look at the back end. I mean, loaded with lengthy cornerbacks, guys like Dakota Fields, guys like Aaron Flowers. You obviously got Siona Lalalu coming in and the JUCO ranks. Ife Obadegu coming from St. Francis Academy. This defensive class is absolutely loaded from all three levels. And what's exciting is you have it's going to move up. They haven't added Jericho Johnson into this ranking yet. You got a top 5 class, might even bump up to 4 or 3 with the addition of Jericho Johnson. And then you scroll down. So you have a really good high school class coming in. And then you scroll down to what they're doing in the transfer portal. You had 2 of the best quarterbacks in the portal in Dante Moore and Dylan Breland. You obviously flip Matthew Bedford, a guy that I think can play on the inside for Oregon this year. And then you go out and get one of my personal favorites in Kobe Savage coming from Kansas State. So you're marrying a really good high school class with a very, very good transfer portal class as well. And you look at the roster construction for Oregon. I mean, it's going in the right direction. This is a team that's built to win games in the Big Ten. And many of you guys know I'm a Michigan fan. 1, can't wait to see Oregon in the Big Ten. 2, would be lying if I wasn't a little bit nervous about it as well, because Dan Lanning in this Oregon program, if there's a program you want to buy stock in, the Oregon Ducks is that program. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. This has been a blast of a program to talk about. Can't thank y'all enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.